Everywhere. You could just tap it on the screen, that would work.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
am I gonna panic mode? Okay.
We don't have fancy screens.
Okay, so we go back to screen share. Why isn't it sharing it? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I'm already sharing it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so would anybody like to start with introductions?
Start.
Thank you.
One more I'm a full-time faculty in science department. I teach biology and sometimes chemistry.
This is me. I'm Evie, and I'm a new coordinator at the testing center.
My name is Jeff. This is Jeff. I work in the health careers in the diagnostic medical sonography program.
Hello, I'm Kara. I'm an ESL instructor in adult education.
Michael Henson and Computer Information Systems.
Todd Nikowitz, automotive.
See, no, you're not.
Marty is the director for teaching access.
All right. I can start. So all students who are able to take their test with accommodations come through the CAAS office. So they have to apply through us first. The way that we determine whether or not a student requires accommodations and what those accommodations might be, we go through this process. So the first process is we kind of think about the individual considerations. Each student submits an application. It's called their confidential data form. It identifies the student's basic information, maybe their disability, and they have a conversation with us also about how they feel that disability impacts them inside the classroom as well as in regards to testing. So that's in the student application, and then the disability documentation usually we'll take in the forms of if a student's coming from the high school, it might be a 504 plan, it might be an IEP or an individualized educational program that special ed students usually get. If they don't have any form of documentation or they're further separated from their high school, we have a psychiatric documentation form they can take to a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor. We also have our medical documentation form they can take to their medical provider if it's more of a medical issue, so that we have that documentation to state what the disability is so that we can address it. We also consider the laws. The Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, they're what tell us that we have to provide these accommodations for these students. The whole purpose is so that we can give them equal access, right? We need to be able to provide that bridge between their disability and the classroom so that they can still access the curriculum the same as any other student in that classroom. And then finally, we take into consideration best practices. We follow AHEAD, which is the Association on Higher Education and Disability. They often come out and post best practices. For example, one of the recent changes was they said that it's better to have an interactive process when we're considering accommodations. So we started implementing intake appointments so we can sit down with these students and have a one-on-one conversation about that. And then other professional organizations as well, like APA.
Like, I'm a certified rehab counselor, so I have a whole separate code of ethics I have to follow in line with all of this, and they have their own guidance on how to best support students with disabilities. So we have to manage all of that. And I would say, since we started doing intake appointments, we do have more students like start our process and finish it and use their accommodations in class and understand what their rights and responsibilities are. Before, it was very impersonal. Students would just submit it, drop it off in our office, email it to us. We may never see the student. So, but now they know our faces, our names, and kind of seem more engaged and understand.
Yes. I guess I have a question because I'm a STEM teacher during the day.
Yes.
So I do work in adult and ESL, and are they considered students who are part of this?
So students who are adult ed, continuing education, any of our certificate programs, degree programs can all come through CAAS.
So how would you know if they're, in CPS we have the same issue, if
right.
they're newcomers, if they do have a disability on campus, because they don't have any, some of them don't have documentation, so how do they just do the new intake process? Because I have a suspected student, I'm gonna ask you.
No, that's fine. We knew there were going to be questions. So, like K through 12, normally the parents kind of reach out to the school and like, hey, I think my student needs some support.
Yeah.
In college, it's all on the student to
Exactly.
self-disclose. We do get referrals from faculty. So
Okay,
you can
that's
submit through a retention alert or like email us. We also have a referral form, and then we will contact the student and just be like, hey, we offer supports, and there are some services we offer to all students, not necessarily testing. But just be like, if you would like to learn more, please reach out to us. We can't force students to use accommodations, but we can definitely give them some information and resources and hope that they give us a chance. So yeah.
Just to ask something,
Yeah.
one more thing on the same topic. So the wording says in the law, the Americans with Disability Act. So
Yes.
regardless of anybody's immigration
Yeah.
status, we provide to everyone,
Yeah,
right?
that's the federal government called it the Americans with Disabilities Act. But anyone who's coming for services on campus, we follow that for everybody. So these are just some of the common testing accommodations, and if you do have students who have CAAS services in your classes or courses, you should receive a memo of introduction, and we send that usually within a day of the student telling us that they want to use their accommodations. So these may be what you see on that memo. So the extended time on a test, which is normally time and a half or double time. We do not do unlimited time. We do get asked. We don't do that. Tests read aloud. We do use software. So students take their tests in our office. It is proctored by our staff. And we use a software called Kurzweil. And it will read the test to the student. That way, because a human reader, you can stress different words, things like that. This kind of takes that out. Low distraction. Notice we don't say no distraction. Low distraction. So we have some students like very sensitive to like if the air conditioner kicks on or someone's walking by a room or if someone gets up from a desk to leave. So we kind of try to minimize that. We have a very small testing room and there's a photo later. Use of a calculator. And then use of a computer for longer responses. So for some of our students who maybe have essay responses in an exam, they may struggle with writing it out. So they type it on Word. In our office, we will print it out. We tell them, like, let us see it before you do it. We print it out, we'll save it and submit it however it needs to be saved. So those are the most common. We do have students who, there's a few students approved for like noise canceling headphones. Again, not your regular earpods, like actual noise canceling headphones. And then we have some students who maybe for medical reasons need to have access to a cell phone. So they usually test in our office as well. So we know that the cell phone is sitting there and they're not like text messaging their friends to get the answer to question 5. So these are the most common ones. Yes.
Couple of questions. So for low distraction, I know as you mentioned, some people do use that. So if in the letter it says, please provide low distraction, that does not automatically mean they can use the earbuds.
Yes.
It has to be approved specifically.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, so there are some students who are so distracted so easily or so overly stimulated that they need the noise canceling headphones, but there are some students who are just in a room with only a handful of other students, they do just fine. So normally one reason why we do intakes, we can ask students, and if we saw that they had noise canceling headphones before, we usually talk with them and explore why and figure out if it would be something that would be appropriate here.
So my second question is about tests read aloud. So most of my tests are online.
Mm-hmm.
Your software,
Yep.
Kurzweil, it can read
Yes.
from the blackboard.
Yes.
Deployed exams.
I think the only system we have an issue with Kurzweil working with is if it's, I'm going to say McGraw-Hill. Yeah, so McGraw-Hill uses their platform, it's called Connect.
Correct.
Their
That's what we
platform
use.
doesn't allow Kurzweil. So we've had students who still take their tests in our office, and sometimes they're in the room by themselves and they just kind of read it out loud to themselves. It's whatever the parameters that Connect has, it doesn't allow the software to work. So we are exploring other options.
So my exams are in Blackboard, not connected.
Okay,
through-
yeah, Blackboard's fine.
So that should be fine. However, I teach biology. There are so many terminologies, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus. One student who is right now, that's the situation, and this student indicated that she can't understand the software
Okay.
and she needs human help. If somebody says that, do you provide a person who can read the test to them?
So we haven't historically, but if the student, like, it would be a conversation we can have and figure out, because some software work better than others. Because a lot of schools, like, we just have Kurzweil. I know a lot of schools also use Google Read and Write, and there's another one I'm gonna go blank on right now. But we can, if the student will reach out to us, we can speak with them and kind of maybe figure out if there's something we could do. Yeah.
Talk to you then.
Yeah, we always tell students if there's a question about their accommodations or an instructor has a question to let us know. Like, we're here to help them. Like, we're nice people.
Can I come one day and listen to this,
Yeah.
what it sounds like? I
Mhm.
want to know
Yeah,
in my exams.
not a
Thank you.
problem. Yeah. All right.
So the next step is the testing process. A lot of times we get questions about why you have to submit a form for each test. Well, this is kind of where that comes into play. So the first step is that the student tells us, hey, I want to take my test with you. I want to use my accommodative testing time. At that point, we tell them, please communicate this with your professor. We also have them fill out a student appointment form where they will request a specific time and date. We also stress to the students that they need to request this appointment at least 48 hours in advance, just because we have such a small little testing space and it can get a little cramped, especially around midterms and finals. So we try to get those appointments in as early as possible. After we receive that request from the student, we then send you an email saying, hey, so-and-so has expressed that they want to take their exam with CAAS. Can we please have the exam? And that's when you will fill out the faculty testing form, which is one of the little handouts I gave you. You would just fill out the top part here with the date, the name, your name. We ask for your contact number for the time of exam in the event that some sort of error pops up or we need any clarification. Sometimes we'll get an office number and then you're not really in your office when they're taking the test, so it's hard to reach you. So any way that we can reach you would be very helpful. Your class name and section, the quiz name, the last day the student can take the test, kind of like the due date when the test is due. And then the last one is the amount of time your class receives. So if your class is getting 60 minutes to take the test an hour, then you would write 60 minutes. When we get it, we're the ones who will calculate how long they will get. So if it's time and a half, they'll get 90 minutes. If it's double time, they would get 120 minutes. Okay? Any materials all students are able to use on the exam. I have an example also filled out on the back of your second handout. But you can, like, some people say, oh, you can use a note card as long as it's one-sided. That's where you would include that there. You can use notes. You can use enclosed formula sheets. You would include that in that spot. And then other notes to CAAS, if you have a password for like a Blackboard exam, that's where you would indicate that so that we're actually able to get into Blackboard. Once you send us that back, we process through it. We confirm with the student their appointment so that they can come and take their exam with us.
So I don't know if it's on this slide or another one. Because we do have such a small testing room, we do partner with the testing center to proctor some of the exams and quizzes for CAAS. We still ask that you send us the faculty form and the student makes the appointment with us, so then we can make sure, like, we try to space students out because the testing center is working with a lot of other students as well. So, because I know sometimes students are like, oh, I always take my test at the testing center, and then we stop getting information. Testing center is not going to know they're a CAAS student. So it's important for us to get this form because then we let the testing center know, like, hey, this student should have 2 hours. They're allowed to have these items. And then we do all that behind the scenes. So on the day of the exam, a lot of our policies for testing mirror or are based off the testing center. So again, we want students to show up at least 10 minutes early, ask for an ID. We know our students, but we still ask for the ID. We ask students to kind of put all their possessions up, including cell phones, smartwatches, anything they're not allowed to have. They cannot access during the exam. Once a student starts an exam, there are not breaks unless it is an approved accommodation. So if a student's like, hey, I need to go get a drink of water, it's like, well, you don't get breaks. So we try to tell them, like, hey, before you start, make sure you're ready to go for the next 2 hours or however long they have. In the CAAS testing room, which is what these photos are, we do have cameras in the corner so we can proctor remotely. So it's either us, we have a lab supervisor, Anthony, he will monitor, proctor, and then we have a work study student as well. So whoever's proctoring it will tell the student how long they have, what they're allowed to have for the exam, and then when the student's done, they let the proctor know. We make sure everything's submitted, nothing's been saved or emailed to anybody else. And then if it's a test or an exam, you have to pick it up, we'll let you know. Otherwise, I think 75% of the exams we see are through Blackboard or online, so you automatically get the results and we don't have to do anything. We will reach out if there is a behavior concern, like the student was cheating, left the room multiple times, things like that, we will email you. So, but this is kind of the general. Yes.
Some common errors that we do see quite frequently are last minute appointments. Usually that's on the student. We'll give them a no notice. Hey, this is your first time. Please make sure you submit your appointment within 48 hours. If it happens again, then they get a second warning. The third time, if it happens, we'll look at the due date, and if it's not due till the end of the week, we ask them to reschedule their appointment just because it's difficult to make sure that everybody gets their own testing time. Sometimes we don't get an exam. So sometimes I don't know if there's like a misconnect. So check your emails, because when we're asking for exams, usually we're going to email you and say, hey, so-and-so is taking their test on this day. Can we please have the exam? Because if we don't get it, we can't give them the exam. Additionally to that, if you are giving an exam on Blackboard, you need to make sure that the time that you give that student is reflective of their accommodative testing time, right? So there's a way that you can mark that in Blackboard so that one specific student gets time and a half, right? So for example, Susie is enrolled in ABC 123. Her class will have 60 minutes to complete the chapter 1. She has double time, so she gets 120 minutes. So you would go into Blackboard and you would put that exception in where she would get the 120 minutes. Because then when she pulls up Blackboard, when she comes to test with us, we verify that she has the correct accommodative testing time. If she doesn't, that's when we need to reach out with you. So that's why it's important that we have your contact information.
And one thing is, like, we can't change the time in Blackboard because we're not the instructor or faculty for the course. We've been asked, like, we cannot do that. It has to be the faculty member. So a lot of times we're calling, emailing, and the student cannot start their exam until that is changed. So we've had students wait an hour or 2 hours in our office while we wait to hear back from the faculty member. So we always make sure before we put the password in and hit start that is correct. So that's probably like, it hasn't been so much of an issue this semester, but I know in previous semesters that was like our #1 concern we had. So.
But just adding to that, I mean, the newer version of the Blackboard that we have is really nice in that regard. All you have to do is just add that accommodation one time.
Yes.
It will apply to everything. So perhaps since people may not be familiar, maybe when you send out the letter, maybe guide them how to do that.
And I think when it was happening, it was for a few programs within one department. I think there was a lot of new staff and they hadn't changed to the new Blackboard yet, so trying to figure it out. So I literally found the directions on Blackboard's like FAQ page and was emailing it. Right. But yeah, once that student starts the exam or quiz, it cannot be changed. So we're like, so we're doing a better job as staff trying to make sure they have what they're approved for.
In old days, every assessment you had to do that. That was painful.
I think that was the problem. So yeah, much better now. I knew the testing center was on here. So where do students test? We do work with the testing center. So again, we have the student make the appointment with us. You provide us our faculty form. We will take care of everything from there. We work very closely with Brent, the director, and his coordinators and workers to make sure our students are set up. If there's any problem during the exam, they will contact us. I know they also reach out to faculty. Again, during midterms and finals, that's some of their busiest times, also with doing placement exams. So we always tell students, you may test down there for one exam, but not the next one. So always pay attention to where we're scheduling you. Again, test read aloud. We use Kurzweil. And actually, Kurzweil can be used by anybody on campus to have anything read aloud. If you're on the CAAS webpage, there's like a technology section, and there's actually a link to it. So anyone with a Triton email can access it to have a book read aloud, an assignment, anything like that. Again, distraction-free. We can't say no distraction, but we're trying to give as much of a low distraction as possible. Our testing room is right off the hallway, so we've put up signs to have people be quiet. We're also looking at some sound masking to help with the noise. Can we deliver completed exams? Years ago, CAAS would deliver exams to the faculty's mailbox or department. Unfortunately, cannot do that at this time. I know I've had to do it in very rare circumstances when there were issues, but we do ask that faculty pick up the exam. If you haven't picked it up within a few days, you're supposed to be sent an email as a reminder, like, hey, we have students quiz number 1. It's usually during finals. We want to make sure you have it in time so you can put grades in, so you may send a few more reminders. So those are probably the common questions we have for testing.
And then here's the example of the completed faculty testing form. You kind of have it on the bottom of your handout if you do need to reference it. Do you have any questions?
If it goes beyond testing, that's fine too. While you have us.
So if I have a CAAS student in one of my classes,
yeah.
He hasn't said anything to me about anything. Like, I mean, he takes the quizzes, he does fine. Do I even approach him about anything?
So we always tell the students that they should introduce themselves to their instructor and just be like, I have CAAS services, and they should let you know when they want to use them.
Okay.
We do have a lot of students who only use like their testing accommodations for midterms and finals. They don't do it for chapter tests, short quizzes. It's really up to them. And for some of our students, they don't need their accommodations in all their classes and maybe specific subjects.
Okay.
So he may be doing fine in your class. But we do tell students, if you're going to use your accommodations, you have to let your instructor know in advance. You can't walk in at 10 o'clock for a 10 o'clock class and go, hey, I'm going to go over to CAAS. Like, don't do that. But, it's up to them.
Okay.
But we now have access to see, like, their grades and how they're doing. So if we see that students may be struggling with a class and missing a lot of assignments, we may reach out and be like, hey, don't forget about you're approved for these accommodations. Try to be a little more proactive.
I just make a point of saying that in the class that don't hesitate to use. If you're approved for extra time, maybe you don't realize it. It might be beneficial. Try it out.
Yeah.
There's no shame in it. Just use it. So as soon as I receive the letter, I just add it. It's their choice. If they want whatever time, let's say they get double time, it's their choice. But it's available to them.
I know for many students, especially if they're directly out of high school, they're used to just automatically having all their accommodations, not that they have to advocate for it and inform the instructor. So for some students, we do see as the semester goes on that they come to us a little bit more as they're getting comfortable. But again, like I know of a couple students who have only used their accommodations for math or science. They're not using it for anything else. But it's because those subjects are a little harder for them. There's a little more formulas, technical jargon. So again, Yes.
Previously, for my online quizzes at Blackboard, I've been setting it just for no time limit, just because it took some time with this connection issue or whatever. But, is that okay from your end too, if I just send the student to you and be like, hey, 60 minutes is the time limit, and then they'll adjust it?
Yeah, so as long as you built it into Blackboard, like whatever there's, so if you put it as unlimited time for everyone in the class, that's your choice. We're not doing it. But when they come to us, you'll probably get an email from us or Maria, our assistant, and being like, well, how much time are they really getting? Because we calculate how much time they're using. So usually when we get one that says unlimited time, we contact the instructor.
If you write it on the form. If
Yeah.
you set it in Blackboard as a limited time,
That's,
once the student hits that time limit, we go in and we're like, okay, your time is up. So we don't let them go unlimited.
I mean,
We
I
do
always
follow.
include it
Yes.
too,
Yeah.
but is that extra work for you? Like, if you have to do the timing yourself, does it make your job?
We're proctoring it anyway, so
Yeah.
no, that's fine.
I would say this, because we had this twice actually in the last week and a half. You know, some exams are being proctored, and I'll use the McGraw-Hill Connect again. They use
Proctorial.
Thank you. That we cannot access on our computers in our office. I know the testing center can't either. So that student had to use her personal laptop. So she sat in our testing room for the 3 hours being watched by us and having the system watch her. Honestly, if it's being proctored that way and everyone else is taking the exam at home, if she's not needing us to watch, she didn't need to be there. So really, it's only if you need your student's exam or quiz to be proctored that they really need to schedule with us. But you know, for a lot of our students, it becomes a habit and they don't want to deviate from that. So we're starting to kind of keep track of which classes and platforms we can't access, because none of our computers, desktops, laptops, we can use those. Thankfully, that student had a personal laptop. Do either one.
So your service, I mean, except for the read aloud software, if I'm understanding it correctly, it's not different than the testing center.
Correct.
So we can just send people to the.
Well, the thing is,
Is
the
that
testing
true?
center won't know their accommodative time.
But if it's built in on the Blackboard, you don't have to do anything. It's
Well,
provided to
the
them.
further
When
Evie.
we receive the form from you, you have like the time for the student, but then when we look at the form, it's only 60 minutes. But this student have 120 minutes and we would not know that. So we would stop them because we will have to call you. We say there's only 60 minutes on the form, why do they have 120 minutes on the Blackboard? They will need to contact you, so what is it? Then we don't know whether it is CAAS student or not. So it's still better to go through CAAS.
Like we do have students who start scheduling directly with the testing center because like, well, I've taken 3 tests down here, why am I bothering with you? But the thing is, again, if it's in Blackboard or my math lab or whatever, it's like, well, this form, because I know they have their own testing form, it may say 60 minutes, and when they open it on the computer, if they see 120, I know their proctors will cut it off at 60 minutes, no matter what the system says. So we prefer the students to come to us. Now, if they know they'll finish in 60 minutes, that's fine. But yeah, just to be safe, we tell them to come to us, and then that way we can notify them.
Because sorry. Hi, everyone, I'm Juan. I had a student who was hard of that, and my CAAS student. For me, I usually have a conversation privately with my CAAS students. When I had one student, I took that student over to CAAS. We walked over there together. But nevertheless, with that, the student went to the testing center. I didn't know that, and she's right. I'm sorry. Evie's right. The testing center called me because in my math lab, it was set up for 2 hours to take. But I forgot that my student was going to CAAS, but CAAS, for whatever reason, the student went to the testing center. And the testing center didn't know about the student's accommodations. So they called me. They couldn't get in touch with me, so they went back based on what the form said. They cut them off. So the student in this case had to do it over again because I forgot to put the name as their accommodations because they were going to CAAS. I normally tell my students follow me if they're going to CAAS to take their exam to let me know the date so that I can go in and program it in my math lab. That's what we use, not Blackboard. So I can program in my math lab for that additional time. So if it is a student that has double the time, I calculate it, but I also put in maybe 5 extra minutes just in case I get it wrong. Then they go over to CAAS. But I also tell my students at the beginning of the semester, I do it as a collective group. But students who are part of CAAS, I separate them and say, if you're going to have any of your accommodations for math, let me know because it's not assuming that I'm going to do that. And that's not to be bad, it's because you're right, because some students are like, oh, I'm good with the quiz being in class because it's only 5 questions.
Yeah.
I still gave them the opportunity to let me know. because based on their accommodations, they are allowed to go over to CAAS to take any and all exams. But just make sure, as an instructor, I just make sure and let them know, if you go to the testing center, it's not gonna be the same. Because you're right, there are some students that are just used to going to the testing center and they forget to go to check in with CAAS. That was just me doing as an faculty member, because I, don't see that.
And we'll say this, I've also had some calls lately from faculty saying a student is saying they're connected to CAAS and we have no record of them. So if there's ever a student who says they're supposed to have extended time or anything, feel free to call or email us and we will look them up to see if they are connected to our office. Because if you did get an email from us for that semester, they may not have completed the process. Because the student has to tell us every semester what classes they think they will use their accommodations. And to give you an idea of how many students, we knew of like 112 students for spring as of last week. I got a list of 272 students enrolled in classes right now who have connected to CAAS at some point. So there's 160 students walking around who we didn't know about this semester. So we always say if a student is saying they have CAAS and you have not heard from us, feel free to call one of us, email us, and we can check it out. And if they just haven't finished it, we will reach out to the student and be like, hey, you don't have us exactly yet, but let's finish this process.
Just curious, how many students do you have enrolled with you?
So the email said 272. I then opened a whole bunch of files. Right now, there are 364 students on campus who could be using CAAS and are approved for accommodations. Not all of them are using them, but those are 364 students I know of.
How long is the approval process? Like for a person who doesn't have?
That's a good question. Usually it takes about 2 weeks. We try to get it done as quickly as possible, especially with students who are currently sitting in classes. But like around this time of year, for example, I just had to go to one of the high schools and I have like a good 20 applications to go through. So like at those points, like at the beginning of the semester and midterm, sometimes it does take a little bit longer.
So because this is my STEM teacher, to open a referral, what kind of evidence do you need to say? None?
No, so basically, like, we got a referral, I think it was this morning, might have been late yesterday, and it was just a retention specialist, like transition specialist is also a high school, a retention specialist saying there was a student in a class who they thought would need extended time or has mentioned that they have some learning difficulties. We just reach out to the student and we say, hey, come meet with us, and we'll do the paperwork with them. And then we kind of talk with them to figure out what documentation we need. And sometimes they have it. Sometimes they got to take the form to their medical doctor. So usually getting the paperwork back is the longest part.
Okay, this is just good to know because I'm like thinking of with the ESL program, students can only take the class 3 times before they can't take it anymore. And a lot of them are like, I mean, you don't know if it's language or it might be a disability. So,
And some of them might be both.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, it's kind of hard to say. But I know a student in mind that I've talked to another instructor about, and it's like, I'm not sure if she's getting it.
Yeah.
So.
I have one of my students went through that same process. She is my student from last semester. She was going through the process of CAAS. I don't think she got it because it didn't show, I didn't get an email back. But she let me know, but I just told her until I get confirmation that you are allowed to get these services, you have to be treated just like a regular student. But she was very nice. She did come back to me and tell me that she was not approved for it. So I just let her catch up on her own time for that. But you're right, there are a lot of students, because I had a student, in fact, I can't remember saying I see him, we walk over to CAAS because he's like, I didn't know, let's walk over to CAAS together. Because he assumed that because he came from high school, it automatically transitioned over. And I said, that's not how it works.
And we do tell students, we do tell students once they're approved, they're not retroactive. So if they wait till week 14 of the semester, they're not getting to retake everything from the first 14 weeks. That comes up periodically toward the end of the semester. So we tell students, like, there's never a deadline or it's never too late, but if you know you're going to need it or you see that you're struggling, let us know. And again, some students, A, don't know who we are, or B, where we're at. So we have faculty like Tawan walk students over. I've had counselors, the Academic Success Center, TRIO, like walk over. Actually, Thursday, I'm actually going to the T building to meet with a student because he hasn't gotten to our office yet. So if it's like you referred a student and they're not following up, I will come find them at the end of class. I don't want them missing instruction to kind of talk about it. So we're trying to be a little more proactive in following up with students and reaching out so they're not failing classes, especially if there's only, they can take it 3 times, things like that. So, yes.
Sorry. The Kurzweil software, you stated that is available to everyone.
Yes.
And is it available outside of the CAAS room center? Can that be deployed in a classroom?
Yes, so there's
during testing?
During testing, to use it, to have tests allowed, it does have to be an approved accommodation. Now, if you're going to let all your students use it, that's your choice. But under this, technology for faculty, there's 2 softwares we actually offer to everyone on campus. One is Kurzweil, the text-to-speech, and literally just use your Triton login.
I can do it. Or no.
You got to ask for your authenticator.
Can I do it?
I don't think any of us can.
Can I do C-Lab?
Try it.
Yep.
Looks slightly different than what we have. Yeah. So yeah, basically this is what it looks like when the student logs in, and then basically, yeah, always have it.
So basically it would, it's like an add-in, is that what it is?
Yeah, so on our computers it pops up as like a drop-down and we log in, but like for students, if they're going to use it, like if their book is electronic, they just have to
Here's an example.
copy it.
Okay.
Get that. Oh, there we go.
So you would click where you want it to read.
The Certain Hour. Design des Poets by James Branch Cabell.
They can also like make changes to the voice.
Yes.
They can change the speed. You can have it read by word, by sentence, paragraph. So we ask them to play with it a little bit before they come in to take an exam, just so they know what they're doing. Yeah. But that's Kurzweil, and then
Otter, it's a software, again, open to anyone on campus to record lectures. We have students use it to record meetings with instructors, tutoring center, anything like that. And basically, each semester, the student signs an agreement that they're not going to share their recordings, they're not going to sell them, they're not going to use them, mischievous ways. And it's an app they can download on a cell phone or on a computer. I do know there are departments on campus who don't allow audio recording, but if it's an approved accommodation, they have to let the student. But I do know in some classes like psychology, there's some sensitive topics. We do tell the student they have to turn it off. For like, if it's a personal story someone is sharing, like that should not be shared.
No, I was just gonna say, in iLaunch for all of you in M building, we do have that software installed in the computers for our math students. We have it set up at the first station in iLaunch. The manager in the lab knows that it is designated for our CAAS students. However, any of our students can use it. We just let them know that it's programmed to read out loud. It is just programmed. We have to get the license that CAAS have to get the same license. So we do have it in the M building if there are any students who take math.
And then they can also go to ETRC and it's on their computers as well.
Is there accommodations for lab practicals?
Yes, we've had some. It really depends on the lab and what the accommodation is.
Okay.
I'm going to be very vague. I've worked some, you're with automotive?
Yes.
Okay, so I know I spoke to Kenneth Davis before for students and trying to figure out how things, we do have students in other classes with labs. And again, it really has depended on the class and the need and the students' accommodations, trying to figure out how to work. Some classes are a little harder than others.
Sure.
But yes, we can. Automotive comes up a lot. I've also, for students who have clinical experiences, so like health careers specifically, I've had to work with some of their clinical sites to make sure the students had accommodations. So actually I just did one about a month ago to try, like, we never disclose why a student has accommodations, but we kind of talk about their learning style, what they benefit from, and try to figure out how it could be implemented or what they can offer so the student can be successful. And again, it's a reasonable accommodation under the ADA, and there's certain criteria. So we're open to work with our clinical partners too.
Other questions?
Yes.
Can I ask, when I submit this by email, the little testing form, sometimes I'll be like, yeah, the students already talked to me, they're like, yeah, the student's planning on coming on Thursday afternoon around X time. Is that bad because it could potentially jam up your schedule if you have a scheduling conflict?
So yes and no, because you're in DMS. So health careers, we have a lot of nursing DMS students, so they tend to want to take their exams at the same time. So health careers seem to be the best at scheduling in advance. So we usually know a few weeks out for some students. So then we could let the other student know, go, hey, we don't have a space at this moment. And if like they're having their test read aloud, the testing center doesn't proctor it, we do. Like, let's see if we can move you 30 minutes one way or the other. So that's why we have the students make the appointment, so we can make sure we have space. Yes?
I have a question. One, by the way.
Yeah.
I do it to my students all the time. Is there any way that maybe you already have it as a PDF file where we can fill it in and send it directly to you, or is it still?
This form?
Yes.
Yeah, we have it. We can email it.
I think, is it a Word doc?
So right now it's in a Word doc. We did have it in a PDF, but I'm pretty sure we can make it into a PDF.
I think people were having problems using the fillable fields for some reason, so we switched it to Word, but I can make it to a fillable again.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you prefer the PDF, let us know. We can. I'll say Danielle will do that. I'm not a tech person.
Testing has one.
Yeah.
It's easier, so we send it over. Even though, like, if it's an example, I know where you're at, I can come over and pick it up. It's just easy to send the form in, especially when you like a student tells you, like today, you're like, oh my God, they closed for me because your office is closed for those individuals who teach at night.
Yes. We are now open till 6. We're open 8 to 6 Monday through Thursday and 8 to 4 on Friday. And to be honest, most nights I don't walk out of here at 6 o'clock. So we are here.
That used to be the problem because it's at nighttime at 7 o'clock. You're like, oh my God, I got hurry to get the cast form in, and it's too late.
And usually if a student is taking an evening class or only can take their test in the evening, we automatically work with the testing center. But we've had a few math students who are like, I can only take my test at 7 o'clock at night. We're like, that's fine. We may be closed, but they're open.
Right.
So yeah.
And that's the same for like intake appointments too as well. If we have to stay a little later, it's no big deal.
We can also do those virtually. They don't actually have to physically come in our office. So for any students just taking online classes.
Sorry if I missed this. Testing center is open on Saturdays, right?
Yes.
How about?
We are not. And honestly, I don't know if we've had many tests on Saturdays lately. I know we did when I first started a year and a half ago, but lately most of ours have been during the day requests that we get. I'm sure as the semester goes on, it will change.
We don't get a lot on Fridays either. It's mainly Monday through Thursday. Nobody wants to take a test on Friday. Okay.
So if you ever want to come to CAAS, Friday's a great day. It's very quiet. So yeah.
Yeah, nice space.
We're working on some other changes, so hopefully we'll be a little nicer too.
Right. Good. That used to be my office.
Any other questions? If you ever have one, definitely feel free to reach out. You can email the CAAS email, which is caas@triton.edu. Our entire office can see that email, or you can email one of us directly. That's fine too. But we're here if there's any questions, issues. If you think a student may have CAAS and you haven't heard, again, reach out.
And then I'll get that fillable PDF out to you when I get back.
To all of us, you mean?
Yeah, sure. I can send it to everybody. Sure.
I just say it's catch up because then you're right, I'm thinking, I'm sitting, it's like, testing already has one, it's like, oh, great, send it over there, I can go pick it up, or it's like the form, you're like, oh, okay, I gotta fill it out, oh my God, I forgot, they're closed. And I really, for me, because I don't want to slip anything in the mailbox I undo, I want to give it directly to my because I don't want anyone else to see their information except CAAS.
We do have a mailbox outside of our office. I think only 3 of us have a key to it. So if you put it in an envelope and drop it in there, we'll get it first thing in the morning. So I think only me, Danielle, and our assistant Maria has the key. So. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.